Should we already give it to them or right on? Hello. All right. That's maybe one. You would, I think you would. Yeah, you speak.
To ensure prosperity.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, start already. Yeah.
Repercussions for countries.
Okay, just can you tell them to to screen the room? Okay, all right. So they're going to show the video for the yeah, yeah. It's
Populations,
fine.
increasing economic and environmental pressures on these systems.
Are you
Environmental pressures have, of course, economic repercussions. Do we need to have changes or transformation in our food systems, in our energy systems, and in our waste systems in order to meet sustainability objectives, to meet the sustainable development goals, and to ensure prosperity in the future? And while we often put climate change in an environmental category of problems, it has real economic repercussions for countries and has a medium-term economic risk for the sustainable development of these countries.
This initiative aims for food system transformation towards low emissions, but it's essential that this transformation still enables women and men to build viable livelihoods that don't compromise the ability of future generations to do the same thing.
Living Labs is a inclusive and diverse space for people, for food system stakeholders to co-design, test, demonstrate, and advance their social technical innovations and associated different models of governance within a facilitated organizational structure. CGR scientists are doing things in a new way.
She has been studying technology for more than 50 years. We believe this is a great opportunity for mobilizing the capacities of the CGIARs towards by measuring and estimating not only the carbon benefits of implementing some interventions, but as well the co-benefits, social and environmental co-benefits doing those. We've been doing this in Colombia, for instance, for reducing emissions while simultaneously delivering peace. Priority is the peace. However, the country also is interested in reducing emissions. We can also do it in different countries with different priorities while simultaneously contributing broad our perspective for leveraging the capacities of the CEIR for helping countries to mitigate climate change while simultaneously contributing to other sustainable development goals like hunger.
Hello. So, what do you think of the video? Anyway, yeah, so I would like to welcome everyone to this session on non-market approaches, which is something that I've become passionate about over the last few weeks, just because of a realization that perhaps my research actually fall under non-market approach. And so I just want to introduce myself. I'm Maria Elisa J. Villarino. I'm a research fellow at the Alliance of Biodiversity International and the International Center for Tropical Agriculture, as well as the leader of engagement and agenda transformation at the CGIAR Initiative on Low-emission Food Systems. And that is the video that on which the subject of the video that you saw earlier. And so today, actually, we have supposedly three people here as our panelists to discuss, the history and where we are at in terms of the non-market approaches, which you will find under Article 6.8 of the Paris Agreement. But Diego is like basically the one who was the driver behind putting it in the Paris Agreement, from what I understand. He's busy trying to, sort of wrap up the negotiations around this. So just to start off, let me just read the text on non-market approaches from the Paris Agreement. So the Paris Agreement says with Articles 6, paragraph 8, it says that parties recognize the importance of integrated, holistic, and balanced non-market approaches being available to parties to assist in the implementation of their nationally determined contributions in the context of sustainable development and poverty eradication in a coordinated and effective manner, including through inter alia, mitigation, adaptation, finance, technology transfer, and capacity building as appropriate. These approaches shall aim to promote mitigation and adaptation ambition, enhance public and private sector participation in the implementation of nationally determined contributions, and enable opportunities for coordination across instruments and relevant institutional arrangements. I know that the Paris Agreement defined the concept of non-market approaches, but exactly what they are, that's the question. And I think even the party really still need to understand what this means. So hopefully this conversation we're having today will help sort of unpack what this means. And so with me, I have uh, two guests right now in person and someone who I work with at the Alliance, and he actually was among those that you saw on the screen earlier. And we will talk with him later. But for now, I'd like to invite my two guests, and I would like to introduce them to all of you. And I would like to call on Suparna Lahiri. He is the Senior Climate and Biodiversity Policy Advisor for the Global Forest Coalition and Article 6.8 lead for Climate, Land, and Ambition Rise Alliance. So he's basically among those that at the start, from what I understand, have been working on this topic on non-market approaches, and he's been working on the topic of forest as well as with forest communities for the last 20 years, and and that's associated with global campaigns against carbon trading and offsets. And the next speaker I have is Marcos Norgren, Bolivian. He's from Bolivia, the party that, like I said, was the driving force behind putting the text on non-market approaches. He's a policy and advocacy advisor for the Bolivian Civil Society Platform on Climate Change. He has a background on environmental sciences and biology, as well as in ecotoxicology and botanical ecology, His expertise and the research he has been focusing on is the intersection of agri-fuels and climate change in Bolivia. And Marks, can you join us? And this other person that I have is a virtual panelist. And can we? I wonder if we could put him now on screen just to introduce him. But later he will talk. And that is Augusto Caso Nunez. Is he online now? But in any case, he's the senior scientist leading the group that I'm part of, which is the low emission. Oh, there he is. I'm sorry, he's on the background. But he's the leader of the low emission food systems team at the Alliance of Biodiversity International and CIAT. And he used to be part of Peru's negotiating team. So with that said, he used to be part, no, Augusto? Which negotiating team? Peru. Peru. Yeah.
Yes,
So
yes. I used to be a negotiator between 2009 and 2012, I think.
So before the Paris Agreement came about, but it's now working. I'm working with him, and yeah, and he will talk about our experience in Colombia much later. But for now, I would like to ask actually Suparna about to give us a bit of a history, because I found out from a paper how dramatic it was when it got in there. So maybe you can tell us what happened during that time. When
No, you know, it's dramatic, but it's very sad because Article 6 was supposed to be a set of articles which was using the concept of cooperative approach between the countries to implement climate action, or if you say nationally determined contributions. But then suddenly things changed,
Mhm,
and we could see that the text was coming in, which was using cooperative approach in a very different way.
mhm,
Uh, if you say that 6.2,
mhm,
the main vehicle is ITMO's
mhm,
internationally transferable mitigation options. For us, conceptually, that could be anything like technology,
mhm,
knowledge, it can be ITMO's.
mhm,
Why it has to be carbon uh, trading? You know, why it has to be the kind of 1 ton of carbon should be traded
mhm,
in that way. It was could have been anything else: scientific research, capacity building, technology transfer, as I said, knowledge sharing. But it completely was turned around. And same happened for 6.4, because sustainable development mechanism
mhm,
is what they were talking about. And suddenly this was linked first to the green development mechanism, which at that point of time was a clean failure, because in most of the countries, the projects were stopped because they were not able to sell the credits. Some of the verifier companies were blacklisted, and so it was in a complete disarray. That could be linked to the the green development mechanism could be thought of a future kind of conceptually sustainable development mechanism was far, far an idea from us. But you see that how even an agreed text in Paris is being interpreted through years of negotiation. Today, it has shifted to removals. So carbon dioxide removal, mainly. Now, what is now happening in 6.4
mhm,
is all removals, you know, large scale carbon dioxide removal and capture and offsetting them.
mhm.
So I think when it turned something like that, it was Bolivia actually, which said that we won't be allowing Article 6 to pass
Ah,
unless we get something around.
I see.
non-market. But the point is, he was right because the issue of market-based
Mm.
and other FMA, though one was market-based and other something FMA. What was that? Was in the decision of the 2012 COP
Mm.
came. So it took a decision to work more on not only market based but other kind of solutions. And in 2014 it clearly came in the top decision that there will be work programs on non-market approach through the joint mitigation and
Adaptation.
adaptation. So that started in 2014. And so Diego was right that it has to be anchored somewhere. If you are talking of a COP decision and you took that decision, it has to be anchored somewhere.
Mhm.
So he tried to put it in Article 6, trying to balance the market approach that was being said. And so that's how, at the last moment, when they couldn't find a consensus,
Mm.
and according to the UNFCCC rule,
Mm.
if in the substar any party says that I put a whole bracket to the whole text, then it cannot go to the CMA.
Ah,
So if you say I bracket the whole text, it's gone for the COP.
I see.
You can open it only in the next substar.
Oh, wow.
So the substar text can be opened only in the next substar.
I
So
see.
it doesn't go to the CMA.
Ah,
So that's what I think Diego did.
ah.
And so they had to agree to a non-market approach text.
Okay. So maybe let's pass the mic to Marcus because I think he's very much familiar with what's happening right now in the negotiation. So maybe you can update us. Because I was actually listening to the sessions and what's very, very interesting, including the one that they had on workshops, because I could see now much more interest in it. People wanted to know what it's about, and also because there's a lot of controversies right now happening with the carbon market. So this is an alternative to that. So maybe you can give us an update of what's happening.
Well, maybe just a short update of what is
Yeah.
going on, but the the main discussion is that is going on right now is to try to make everyone, all the parties, to understand of what an NMA
Mm,
is, what it could include, what it should look like,
yeah.
so that we can all like move forward
Or,
on
yeah.
the implementation. And we are in the implementation phase, so
Yeah.
this is a key point, I would say. But also the discussions are including some some arguing about the role of the markets within the non-market approach. So,
Yes. Yes.
and
Yes.
we are, as we understand it, the carbon market doesn't have anything to do with the non-market approach.
Yeah.
The name it says, uh, the name itself says it.
Says it.
So
Yeah.
so this is, I believe, one of the this is the moment we're living now in the negotiation, but we hope that we can move swiftly forward to actually launch the web platform that it is. It was delayed. It was supposed to be launched under these days under the COP, but it's been delayed until, I guess, January. Hopefully, it will come up, and we will be able to start registering non-market approaches and actions within this vision of cooperative action that is a key a point for countries like Bolivia, where we are waiting for it to happen so that we can actually implement around 60% of our national
Yeah.
contribution. So this is very key for countries like Bolivia, which are waiting for financing to actually implement the NDCs.
So you're saying that in Bolivia, NDCs it depends a lot on having to define NMAs. And maybe on that note, maybe you can describe how it looks like in Bolivia, how you're doing it. So just so people have an idea what, because that's, I think, one of the.
I think before that, I no, I just wanted to make it very clear that it could be a conceptual problem for people to think that what is this non-market approach we are talking about, and what is the market approach? Why are we saying that it's not like carbon market?
Mm,
The basic difference is that in the carbon market, in market-based solutions, you actually compensate.
um,
So, so that is where even the carbon market or any market-based solutions is
mhm,
that we provide you with support, we provide you finance,
mm,
but what are we getting in return? So it is
okay,
being seen as compensation.
okay.
In the non-market approach, we see it as a kind of a contribution, and the
Mm,
rightful
mm,
contribution from the corporates or the governments who are historically responsible for the prices.
uh-huh, okay.
And also, it entails a non-market based, what do you call, transactions, which
Yeah.
means that it has to be only grant, so contributing. It cannot be loans, it cannot be equities,
Okay.
it cannot be green bonds,
Uh,
or whatever you say. So that's how the difference comes.
all right.
And I would like to add that the challenge in this view is to try to define what is the innovative, what is the new part of it, how can we make it um, like attractive, as some people could actually see the carbon markets uh, to be. So, and this is one of the key discussions, I believe, that is behind the negotiations and behind the difficulties to see and understand what an NMA is really about,
Yeah.
compared to the carbon market and the offsetting discussion.
Okay.
But I wanted to just briefly present
Mm,
our example, because we have been working together with allies and members of our Bolivian society platform on climate change around how an example of the NMA could look like
yeah.
in a
Yeah.
country like Bolivia. And
Yeah.
I will just briefly like to describe the main characteristic of it. We have been actually working on a quite concrete community in the northern part of Bolivia, in the Amazon part. And we have been working on data, on field data,
Mm,
that we got from our partners, SIPCA, that is working with forest management and agroforestry and other kind of actions in the northern part of Bolivia. And it is an indigenous community of 4,000 hectares, so it's not a very big one. And what we propose that a non-market approach could include in such a community, as an example of what our discussions have been going on, is actions within avoided deforestation, forest restoration as
mm,
well. But it could also include things like replacement of their energy sources. They are using diesel oil, for instance, to produce energy, and these could also be part of NMAs, to replace these with renewables, and actually also reduce emissions from these sources. And we have approximated the emission reductions to around 100,000 tons carbon dioxide every year for this action. But also at the same time, helping them and supporting them to produce ten of thousands of Brazilian nuts, which is their main
yes.
produce, which is widely collected, and they have been doing it for several thousand years, really. Um, yeah, but they could do even better and improve their systems and their ways of doing it, at the same time as avoiding deforestation to happen. Uh, But at the same time, we believe that this should be implemented in order to become an NMA. Really,
Ah,
it should be completed with adaptation measures, helping them to secure their drinking water, which is a problem actually nowadays in some parts of the Amazon. There is no enough water during the droughts that are happening, and more frequently even nowadays. Also as a way to secure clean and effective energy 24/7, so that they have access to it every day, all the time, and as well to include within a more holistic integrated approach, which is the actually
spirit of
the
the.
spirit of the animes, uh, as well to introduce health services that are now in absence. They have not access to
Mm,
and to health, and they have to actually travel several hours to get access to these services. So these we believe can lead can lead to a more sustainable climate action within the community, and can actually help them to um, to keep the forest and the ecosystem much more in better conditions than only with trying to avoid deforestation. So because one of the main drivers of deforestation in Bolivia is actually uh, the 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 agribusiness, which is pushing forward cattle ranching and also agriculture because of the lack of other income sources.
yeah.
These are some of the examples and elements that we would like to see in an anime within the Bolivian perspective.
It just makes me realize that sometimes we want the anime like integrated, but what you're saying is like right now they're probably different projects. They're not together, but there are different projects. But if you put them together, that could be an anime.
Yeah, but the thing is that these projects are not even there now. So
Um,
most of the people have no access to health. There are no projects helping them with the water sources really,
mm,
or securing or making their energy sources available 24 hours a day. They have only access to energy 4 hours a day. So and it is from diesel oil sources. There are several potentials to improvement in this kind of communities
yeah,
could actually co-benefit of actions to reduce deforestation at the same time as increase their production of Brazilian nuts, which is the local produce. But
yes,
it could also be extended to many more forest products like
yeah,
vegetable oils, like tropical fruits, wild cocoa beans that are.
yes,
Bolivia has a huge potential to actually develop, but we haven't had the opportunity to do this, and it could be definitely completely coherent with uh, uh, climate action in a wider view.
yeah. I think your organization that propose using like international trade as a framework for financing.
We believe that could actually give a better dimension of sustainability to this kind of project. Like Brazil nuts are actually
Yeah,
traded globally,
yeah,
and if we could actually include and support and improve the conditions for the production, collection, and trade of these produce, and not only the nuts, but I could talk about several kind of examples of what
mhm,
to produce: rubber, vegetable oils, animal feed
yeah,
used on the base of tropical fruits and so
yeah,
on. It could not only help to the local development, but it could actually help as well to replace the agribusiness commodities that are being traded now, and promote a better and more sustainable consumption habits in the north as well. We really think we could get into a win-win situation inspired by the NMA approach.
yeah.
It is a much more integrated and holistic way to see climate action.
Yeah. Makes me wonder whether how much we involve the World Trade Organization.
No, obviously they won't like it, but I think we need really to be bold. We have 6 years to halve emissions.
Yeah,
This is not a normal situation, and we really have to acknowledge this to begin with if
yeah,
we are gonna be able to tackle it. And I don't think that we do it very often, even at COP28.
yeah,
I mean, this is something that I think we need to challenge us into thinking beyond what we have been thinking about the last 30 years, in
yeah,
which the climate negotiations haven't really moved us
yeah.
forward in this.
All right. Well, thanks, Marco. So I'm going to turn now to my colleague, Augusto Castro Nunez, because I believe when I first heard about non-market approaches, it made me, I think we're doing something similar. I also think that it's kind of aligned with the idea of the spirit of non-market approaches, especially the work that we're doing with the Ministry of the Environment and it's also about innovative financing, which I was discussing with you before coming here. So maybe Augusto, maybe you can share with us the work that we have been doing. It's kind of recent, but I feel like it's something that maybe other countries could also do. So Augusto, floor is yours.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you. And how are you to all the participants and the
Mhm.
panelists? And when I was a negotiator, I used to think all the time how a country that is experiencing conflict, for instance, can implement actions for reducing emissions in the forestry sector and try to access to carbon markets. There are plenty of contexts where that sounds like a dream. So I decided to start a journey to become a scientist and start training in a university to become to get a PhD training, focusing on understanding um, what would be the links between climate change mitigation, how could be what could be the link between forest conservation and peace building and conflict. So I started to do that, and at the end we started to work on how carbon markets could work in conflict settings. We've been working towards that. We've been developing approaches, and we have identified, as many of us know already, that probably carbon markets will not necessarily compensate the cost, or will not over the cost of implementing action for reducing emissions. So how can we use incentives for incentivizing communities, governments to implement carbon strategies or strategies for reducing carbon? And we started to identify that in countries like Colombia, Peru, and even Bolivia, there is plenty of financial and policy instruments that can be used uh, to implement actions that can help to um, switch from a high carbon emitter economy, high carbon emitter production system towards a more low carbon emitter approach. For instance, in Colombia, we identified that there is a mechanism among plenty of others that uh, wants to exchange taxes with companies that wants to implement sustainable production in conflict affected settings. How can we use such mechanism for implementing actions to reduce emissions in the LULUCF sector across Colombia, across conflict settings? How can we identify these kind of instruments in other countries? How can we um, not necessarily avoid carbon market, but how can we complement carbon markets or focus on these instruments instead of using carbon markets in case communities don't want to use them to reduce emissions. At the end, what we want is to reduce emissions. We are all in this fight against climate change. And maybe that's a way for achieving this. Um, thank you. I will leave it here, Elisa.
All right. Well, what Augusto was alluding to was, if I'm correct, is the what's known as obras por impuestos. No, Augusto, are you alluding to
Yes.
that? So, if you just to give you an idea what it is, and this I've been discussing in some for forums, is that in 2016, Colombia actually had a tax reform, and in there they included an option for companies that would have gross sales of around 1,610 UVT of unidad de valor tributario, which is a unit of taxation in Colombia. And the taxes attached to that, 50% of that, they could invest in areas that as part of PIDET or Programas de Desarrollo con Enfoque Territorial. Yes, in Colombia that where the government promotes because of they had a peace pact in 2016 as well as the rural reform. And so in these areas, before it was only more infrastructure, something like that. But recently, I think in 2020, they changed that to include payment for ecosystem services. But now what we're doing with the with the Colombian government, we're working with them to sort of support the farmers in terms of is supporting the for example sustainable businesses like they could put the portion of obras por impuestos into for example infrastructure that could help the farmers cocoa farmers for example to produce high quality cocoa through fermentation. It's just and that's the issue sometimes with the smallholder farmers. No, they don't have a lot of finance. In general, it's actually what we found that it's not very profitable to actually do production traditionally of cocoa. And in order for them to actually increase their income, they have to ferment and dry their cocoa according to standard. But because they're coming off from this from conflict, so they have to establish all these different institutions in order to and the state to be more present there. So that's what he's alluding to. But now I want to ask Suparna about. I've heard this from the sessions how important non-market approaches in really engaging indigenous peoples. And we've heard from GST, all the sessions, talking about the import, especially from Canada, from New Zealand, from Australia, about the importance of really engaging indigenous peoples in the UNFCCC. So, and especially climate action. So I know that the submissions from Clara, you mentioned this so much, and from the sessions, there have been a lot of, advocacy toward that, no? So maybe you can explain to us how NMAs and indigenous peoples
Yeah,
intersect.
actually, that realization, we came because we work mostly on the land sector,
Yeah, like a
forest,
gusto.
forest,
Yeah.
agriculture. And if you go back to the history, the land that was there were all owned by the communities
Yeah.
everywhere,
Mhm.
from Philippines to Colombia.
Yeah.
And suddenly, with the advent of and the invasion of the colonialists,
Mm.
the first thing that they did, because they wanted to get revenue out of the resources there,
Mm.
em- empires appropriated
Uh-huh.
the land and resources from the community.
Yeah.
So at that point of time, their traditional and customary rights were completely taken away,
Mm-hmm.
and state became the owner of the land and resources.
Mm-hmm.
I think in most of the colonial countries in the post-colonial time, there has been a continuation of that same legislation in terms of forest and land.
Mm-hmm.
There has been very few where there has been legislative changes to see that at least their rights are restored
Mm-hmm.
back to what there was when it was appropriate.
Yeah.
You know, that's the first step,
Mm-hmm.
because anything that you do in the land sector for any kind of action,
Mm-hmm.
history also says that it was the standing forest that you still see and was there because the communities were conserving them, protecting them,
Mm-hmm.
because that is their homeland, and that's their connection to everything. Their spiritualism, their culture, their livelihood. Uh, they have their own sense of property rights. And so forest was something like a kind of, if you can say modern language, an iconic linkage to their existence.
Mm-hmm.
You know, without forest, there is no existence.
Yes, yes.
But that didn't mean that they were expecting something out of the forest in terms of finance or money or something. It never happened. But they've continued that.
Mm,
So I think any action that you are talking of today in terms of real climate actions, and we are talking of those
mhm,
in our own terms,
mhm,
you need conservation, you need protection, you need
uh-huh,
restoration. The state cannot do that.
mhm,
Even a forest officer, a trained forest officer cannot do that.
mhm,
You have to realize that. The catalyst and the drivers are both the community.
mhm.
If they don't do it, if they can't do it, then you can't do
Yeah.
anything, those kind of thing. You know, finance cannot conserve your forest. How do you put finance without the actors there on the ground?
Okay. Mhm,
And if you don't get the access to the ground, their right kind of tools. The actors on the ground also need right kind of tools for conserving, protection, and restoration.
yeah.
And to us, those tools are their rights. They are tenure rights, their collective rights, their right to govern their own territory. And that is, and if that happens, I can say that we are talking of such billions of dollars of climate finance.
Mm,
If you can restore their right, collective rights, their governance, this will be the least cost effective approach to climate action.
mhm,
What are we talking about? That financial amount will actually almost get half
mm,
because the push that you need is only for the states to comfort them with the right, and rest they know what to do.
mm,
They know how to use the forest for their own livelihood, how to preserve, what to do with it.
mhm.
So finance is essentially not tied to climate action. We have to remember that finance actually commodifies the climate action, you know, and so i- 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 this conceptual clarity perhaps I won't say missing, but it's deliberately done because
Mhm.
you need what we are trying in what the kind of thing what is happening is that we are hearing natural capital, you know, we are trying into a we are going into a kind of an economy where this forest land water will everything become capital for the corporate.
Mhm.
They need that, and so for that rights of the communities are a barrier to them, and
Okay.
and the state still wants it under its control.
Yeah.
So it's basically as I say, matter of eminent domain and ancestral domain.
Okay.
You know,
Mhm.
and we are the history also tells us that unless these rights are restored, I don't think any real action on land sector is possible without the community's involvement
Mhm.
in there.
Yeah.
You cannot do it.
Yeah.
It's not possible. So if we talk of solutions, if we talk of a non-market approach, the first thing that comes to us in the framework is the involvement of the indigenous people, local communities, women,
Yeah.
uh, who are the bearer of traditional knowledge, because they actually are the leaders in conservation. If they don't get access to the forest,
Mhm.
you cannot think of any kind of action there.
Yeah.
I think that's what matters, and that's why for 6.8 it is essential that because you can see the failure even in terms of carbon markets. Why? The moment you because the carbon markets have its own what we call dynamics, is that you need for carbon accounting how much of carbon credits are generated, and you get payment from the market according to that.
Mhm.
And their counting is from the standing trees.
Mhm.
So they have this whole thing, unless they secure the land
Mhm.
and the forest as a security for the carbon credit they calculated for payment, they can't run the show.
Okay.
So to secure that, they need the communities out of the forests.
Mhm.
If communities access one tree cut, is a reversal
Okay.
for them in that
Mhm.
sense. So carbon market cannot stand a chance because there is no community there who, and that's why they are failing in the sense that when you say the methodology is flawed, then cheap carbon offsets are flooding the market. It has to be because what is a MRV? How are you reporting? How are you verifying what is happening? That is not possible without the involvement of the community.
Yeah.
But the contradiction is the carbon market cannot run with the involvement of the community. The
Yeah.
architecture doesn't allow the communities to be part of that.
Yeah.
And carbon market cannot run in a democratic setup.
Yeah.
And we have seen in the negotiations for 6.2 and 6.4, the more push prevents repressal mechanism, the more you push for human rights, the negotiations falter
Mhm.
because the carbon market cannot act within a democratic setup.
All right. So 1 minute each, and this is of importance to me. I would just like to ask both of you, what is sort of your ask for the research community or scientific community to move forward with better understanding of NMAs as well as with the implementation of that part of the of Article 6.8. So,
I think it's not very difficult. I would say that the scientist needs to connect
mm-hmm.
the missing link
Okay.
because that link had been cut off deliberately and the link is not allowed to be restored.
Mm-hmm.
And that missing link is what I'm saying is that the contribution of the communities
Mm-hmm.
to nature, resource, forests, whatever you call,
Yeah.
even the crops. And so that's why we come to a situation where we have to have science to evolve hybrid crops, high yielding crops, in to replace their traditional crops in terms of agriculture. And because we need to commodify the entire situation, that we had a project which ruined much of the developing countries from the World Bank is that green revolution with high yielding crops, chemical fertilizers ruined the entire stretch of land in many of the countries.
Mm.
And that took away the real seeds, the traditional seeds, destroyed the market, destroyed those traditional seeds.
Okay.
And it cannot go back now. I think I think that that is to me the missing link. And that missing link needs to be restored by science.
Okay. So perhaps last word from Marcos.
Yeah, I wanted to refer just quickly to the thing you said about trade being a new thing. Just shortly, it is really not a new thing. The
Okay.
EU is actually talking about the carbon tax and penalizing
Uh-huh.
deforestation already. The trade is already in the
I
room.
see. You're right. You're right.
So we have to take it in as well,
Uh-huh.
and especially since the rules that are being discussed are going to be affecting small producers,
Yeah.
as small
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
communities, indigenous. So I think it is completely legit to bring the discussion about trade also within this
Yeah.
setting of
Getting
this
yeah.
climate change. So, what should the science focus on? What should the
Yeah.
research focus on? I think one thing is actually the science and the research is not usually good at studying integrality and integrated
Mm-hmm.
systems and so on. So I think that is something that science should be get better at understanding the diverse benefits that an integrated approach could actually bring to the climate action, instead of isolating mitigation actions such as the carbon market intends to do. And that is something that I think is very important to show the value of these integrated actions, and include the value of, for instance, these wild resources, these biodiversity resources,
Mhm.
and to actually try to account for their value, and show the potentials to use
Mm.
them to shift and improve global
Yeah.
consumption habits. So these are some parts of what science should be working on, I believe. And the second one is to actually show us how it's going to be possible to reduce emissions, half emissions, and on the next 6 years using carbon offsetting. It doesn't make any sense to me. How it's going to be happening. I don't see it happening if we are going to keep talking about carbon offsetting. So I'm an opposer. I don't really believe that this is the way forward, and we should be talking about it. Uh, Much of the discussion here at COP28 has been about fossil fuel carbon offsetting
Mhm.
with carbon capture, and I don't think this is the way. And we have to speak up. I mean, this is my role here, and I have to speak
Yeah.
about these things. Thank you.
All right. No, thank you so much to everyone. We don't have more time, but I would like to thank the speakers. I'm sorry because I think we're running, but we do take into account what you're saying, and we'll talk about that more about what we can do as scientists, and hopefully we can have more conversations around this. I think this is an important topic, and you can hear from Jeffrey how they're saying we need to have adaptation, mitigation. Should be balance between the two, and there's a strong connection. At least that's what they're saying in the negotiation. So maybe that's something we should really think about, even and also for us as scientists, because there are some focusing on mitigation, some focusing on adaptation, but it makes sense because it's in the Paris Agreement for us to be more integrated. So with that, thank you, Gusto. See you in Cali in 2 weeks. Thank you so much for those who have stayed around. I know this is kind of a new topic, but hopefully we'll get more attention to this because I think this is an opportunity for us to come together within the Climate Action Committee community. Thank you. Thank you. I know there won't be a lot of people, but I need to start a conversation.